The election should be decided within the next 2 weeks. Keep it here on Channel 5. We will keep you up to date, where our news is always live, local, and late-breaking. And now let's go to the weather with Chip Chipperson. Chip, please tell us you've got some good news for us.
We do have some good news, Hank. We have a jet stream that's reached all the way up to Canada, and it's pushed its way all the way back to us, which means we have some great weather over the next few days. Oh, it's going to be wonderful. I've got some other good news for you too, Hank.
Oh, what's that?
The good news of the gospel. Want to come to church with me?
Well, that is always good to get good news, and that weather is fantastic news. Thank you, Chip.
Hank, you're avoiding the subject. What do you have to lose besides your pagan lifestyle?
In our next story, it seems that a local man has found a litter of puppies and is looking for a home for them.
It's time for you to come on home too, Hank. Home to the house of the Lord.
Well, welcome everybody. Brewster, thanks for joining us and gathering there in the middle school. Thanks if you're tuning in online on our online campus, and thanks for showing up in smoky Chelan. Appreciate you all being here. We're in the second week of a series that we're calling Superfans, and it's easy for me to talk about because I am one. This is me in a nutshell, if you know me for very long at all. In fact, if you know me from second grade on, these were mostly my teams. I didn't pick up the 76ers and the Boise State Broncos till I was like a seventh grader. But I can talk all day about any of these teams. Just pick one. Oh, the Dolphins? Yeah, the 72 Dolphins were the only undefeated team in NFL history, right? 17-0-0. Bob Greasy was the quarterback, number 12. Mercury Morris was a running back. Larry Zonka, 22. Larry Zonka, number 39, was the fullback. Paul Warfield was the receiver. Jim Kick was the side back. As a kid, I had it all memorized. All the stats, everything memorized. I can still talk about it now. 1984, Dan Marino had the best year a quarterback had ever had up until that point. He's the best passing quarterback of all time. Don't try to convince me differently. Yet, how many Super Bowls he win? Okay, well, 0. But we could talk about that too. I can talk about, and don't get me started on Boise State. Because Boise State is more than even the Miami Dolphins, because like Boise's home to me. So that like my people, even though nobody on the team is from Boise, they're all from California. I can talk all day about that. What can you talk all day? What are you into? What do you love? Like when the subject comes up, you just can't wait to give your opinion or give your input. Or, God forbid, someone says, you know what? The 72 Dolphins really weren't that good a team. Oh my goodness, I'll burn your house down. There's no debate with that. They're the only undefeated team in the history. I can get pretty fired up by it. What about you? Listen, this may not come as a big shock, whether you're sitting in Brewster or in Chelan, but I'm also a super fan of Jesus. I'm talking about Jesus. And really, for quite a long time. And I know it's easy for you to say, well, no, duh, that's your job. You know, talking about Jesus is what you get paid for. Showing up on Sunday is what... listen, it's so much more than that. And Jesus changed my life, changed my marriage, changed the direction when things were bad, gives me hope in very difficult times, personally and as a pastor. Gives me something to look future for. Gives me a reason to show up, like on Sunday mornings. I can't wait to get here. Because obviously I love you all. Brewster, I love you more. But the fact is, I have something worth talking about. That has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with what Jesus has done when God said, hey, there's a problem, there's a distance between me and you, Kyle, and that's your sin. And I'm not going to leave you there to figure it out. I'm going to send Jesus as a rescuer. Man, I can talk about that all day. How about you? Well, I mean, what are you a super fan of? Last week, just to review real quick, we talked about the way that people show up and start to know about church or know about Jesus or know about faith is invitation. That invitation is key. Very few people wake up one day and say, you know what, I think I'd like to know Jesus today. I'm not being smart aleck. I'm just saying it's not intuitive. Most of us who have shown up to real life showed up because someone invited us. Now, not necessarily did we all get here that way, but any of us, and we're all in different categories this morning, all right? And I get that. Ideally, when we started real life, this is what we want on a Sunday morning, that we want a third of the people to be here like, yeah, Jesus all the time, always. And a third of the people are like, I'm not so sure, I'm still checking this out. And a third of the people are like, nah, I hate church, I don't know anything about faith, I'm just here because someone promised me brunch, right? I mean, we want everybody's invited to the table. Everyone's invited to come with your questions, no matter where you're at, where you are in your journey. So I get that we're all in different places. But most of us who would call ourselves followers of Jesus, we are that because someone invited us to know more about Jesus in their life and shared it in our life. So last week we talked about the Jesus invite, especially right when he started, was super simple. And I think we, people like me, have made it too complicated. But Jesus is just starting out and he has no followers. He's got no disciples, no posse, nobody that's doing the mission with him. Age 33, he decides to kick that into gear and he starts recruiting people. And the first thing he does is he's walking by and John the Baptist, his cousin slash wingman that set him up, says to a couple of his disciples, hey, listen, if you want to follow the real dude, there he is right over there. And so a couple of John the Baptist disciples said, hey, we're going after this guy. And John tells us this is what happened. Turning around, Jesus saw them following him, and he said, hey, what do you guys want? They said, Rabbi, teacher, where are you staying? Is there any way that we can be a part of this? You're launching this thing. John the Baptist, we trust, says you're a big deal. You're the Lamb of God who picks up and takes away the sin of the world. We want a piece of that. Where are you going? Where are you staying? How can we be involved? We talked about this last week, but the cool thing is that Jesus did not say, agree to this faith statement. Stop doing those things. Cut your hair. He doesn't give them any list of rules and regulations. He turns around and he says, come on. You'll see. That Jesus' invite was just come and see. Come on. Those of us who struggle have made it so difficult, as followers of Jesus, we've made it so difficult to talk about Jesus with other people. Because it was so simple. Jesus said, just come on, just follow me around, you'll get it. But fast forward, I don't know when, but at least in this century, fast forward, and evangelism has become this ugly word. Evangelism is like, we only talk about it in Christian circles and we just whisper it because it's so offensive. Then we turned it to, okay, sharing the good news. That's good. Unless you're a weather forecaster. I mean, you got to pick the right time to share the good news. And then it became, well, I'm just an enthusiastic advocate of Jesus. Like, of course I'm going to talk about it. I'm so excited, I want to talk about it. And I guess for last week and this week, I just thought, man, Superfan fits. And not that you're a fan just showing up a game once in a while, but Superfan means you are so excited you cannot help but talk about Jesus in your life. So the goal was not to explain something, but to experience someone. Instead of having all the answers, I know, listen, those of you that have been walking with Jesus a long time, or God forbid, my professors from Talbot Theological Seminary that are viewing and listening in, all right? I'm sure they tune in every week to get tips on how to preach. I'm not saying there's no words. I'm not saying there's no foundation of faith. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in order to talk about Jesus and invite people to Jesus, sometimes you don't have to get so upset trying to explain it when you just invite people to experience, because Jesus needs to be experienced, not just explained. So in the next few minutes we got, I want to just go through a couple of little snapshots of why it's become so difficult, A, to talk about Jesus if you're a follower of Jesus, or B, to be talked to about Jesus if you're not yet a follower of Jesus. Because a lot of us, especially if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, you have been offended, hurt, rejected, disregarded by people who called themselves followers of Jesus. So here's what happened. Somewhere along the line, and I understand it because I wasn't, we started, as followers of Jesus, we started huddling and hiding. It was for a good reason, and I get that. Somewhere along the line, we as followers disappeared from culture. Two reasons. And maybe this was 50s, 60s, 70s. If you lived in that time, say whoop, whoop. Yeah, you just heard your voice, you old people. Yeah, me too. For sure in the 70s, all right? The best decade in the history of the world. Fashion and music. And I mean, there's no other time where bell bottoms and Barry Manilow were king. It was the greatest time in the history. Middle schoolers, your parents will explain that to you later. But we started huddling and hiding because two reasons. We as Christians, church people, followers of Jesus, we just wanted to be right. So in the name of being right, we started huddling. We had to, not just church on a Sunday morning, but we started our own Christian bookstores, right? Our own Christian radio stations, our own Christian schools. I'm not against Christian stuff. Don't leave here saying Kyle hates Christians, all right? I am one. I went to a Christian school. I worked at a Christian radio station in high school. I'm not against that stuff. I'm saying for some reason we started because we wanted to make sure the message we were proclaiming was pure and undefiled and correct. And the only way we could do that was to get rid of all the unbelievers and non-Christians and just protect us Christians. Which leads us to the second one. It wasn't just in the name of being right, it was being protective. And I get this. I always offend someone in my family when I talk about this. I was raised super strictly, but not with parents and grandparents who weren't loving. The reason they were so strict and protective was because they were loving. The foundation of faith that I got from the family I was raised in, I would never trade. Within that climate, we also hid and huddled because we were scared of the world around us. And they didn't want us to be influenced negatively by the evil culture that was out there. And for some way, they were right. Other reasons, they were completely crazy. My dad loves this story. I was working on a project, 6th grade, going to mow. And I had to go buy some clay. Make some relief map or something like that. At the end of Wooden was Aston's. It's down like the farthest shop down. It's what used to be in the middle of the street, but in the early days, in the 70s, it was at the end of the street. So I said, Dad, my dad loves this. Dad, can I go to Aston's and get some clay? He says, yes, but you have to stay on the left side of the street. You can't walk on the right side of the street. I'm like, oh, all right. Why is that? If you go on the right side of the street, you're going to walk by the Ruby Theater. And I don't want you that close to movies because we weren't allowed to go to movies. Right? Again, he wasn't evil. He was protective. So I don't know what his fear was, but like at the Ruby, the door would open at the same time, the curtain would open, and a naked farm animal would jump out or something. I don't know what the fear was, all right? But Kyle, you can't go on the right side. You have to go on the left side. Old timers who have been here for a long time in Chelan. What was on the left side in the 70s? All the bars. So he didn't mind if a drunken naked dude jumped out at me. He was concerned about the movie theater attacking me, all right? Again, protective. When I went to Nampa Christian, home of the Trojans, perhaps you heard of us, we would have chapel once a week. And in the 70s, in the name of being right and being protective, they would bring in speakers. And again, it's a little Christian school in the middle of nowhere. All right? Billy Graham never showed up to talk. All right? So they bring in these guys. And so I remember 2 or 3 times in high school, they would bring in someone to talk about the evils of secular, non-Christian music. The problem was, our only choice back then was the Bill Gaither Trio. Anyone? Yeah, some of you people are like, yeah. You smoke pot to Bill Gaither Trio. All right, yeah. That's all we had. That's all we had. There was no good Christian music. So they would show up and they'd have a speaker come up and they say stuff like this. Don't listen to the Eagles, right? Because of Hotel California. The hotel is haunted, it's demon-possessed. Stay away from the hotel and don't listen to the Eagles. You can't listen to Elton John. Why? Well, he dated men. You can't listen to music of people who date the same sex. Okay, they're just trying to be protected. Here's my favorite. And this is the protection of hiding and huddling in a nutshell. This dude says, hey, here's another band you should not listen to. And that's the rock, evil, satanic group called Lobo. Anyone? They had a song, and I'll sing it for you. It goes something like this. Me and you and a dog named Boo, traveling and a living off the land. Anyone? Yeah. Now, I thought, me and you and a dog named Boo, maybe that's Satan's going to scare you, but that's not it. He said, that's an evil group because Lobo is a Spanish word for wolf. And the Bible says that Satan comes in wolves, like a wolf in sheep's clothing, so that's why you shouldn't listen to me and you and a dog named Boo. You know what it made us do? Turn it up when Boo came on. Yes. It didn't do it. But in the name of being right and being protective, we started this thing. And what's happened is those of us who love Jesus and want to talk about him don't have an opportunity to. And those people that need to hear about the real love of Jesus are separated and never hear. I'm going to blow through this really quickly. There was a study done a few years ago by the Barna Group, really trusted polling group and everything. And they did a study and they put out a book and it's called Reviving Evangelism Study. And they found out a lot of stuff. The biggest thing they found out was people, especially millennials, are more ready to listen to spiritual conversations than we give them credit for. So here's what we learned. Here's the 2 biggest things that turn people who are far from God or are fading away from God. Here are the things from the study that they found out. Here are I'll give you 2 things that spiritually curious non-Christians are looking for when they have a conversation about faith. Number 1, someone who listens without judgment. That if you want to talk about Jesus, if you're a follower of Jesus, if you can listen, here's a great line, you guys. Tell me more about that. Tell me, how long have you felt that? How long have you believed that? Just tell me more. 2, someone who does not force me to draw a conclusion. Since we've had a discussion, I need you to think and believe exactly the way I do. Do you? You don't? Okay, I'm moving on. If I could sum up wherever you are here, and you're a follower of Jesus, and I know we're all in different places, but the biggest thing the study said, this is a little harsh, in my words, not theirs. Shut up and listen. Listen. Before you want to proclaim something, before you want to start preaching, again, words are important. But if you would just listen up instead of start talking. They have a list of things. You know what's the biggest turnoff in spiritual conversations with people who are far from God? I'll give you a couple. Christians who have all the answers. Sometimes, you know what? It's best to say, yeah, I don't know. I'll get back to you. Here's another thing. Christians who are quick to point out the inconsistency of other people's perspectives. Boy, thanks for sharing that with me. You know what's wrong with you and your opinion? Again, yeah, they may be wrong, but you're not gaining any ground. You're not gaining an audience. You're not gaining a connection to share the love of Jesus with them if you're pushing them aside. The other one, Christians who are good at debating topics. Oh, I'm going to win this one. I'm going to show them. You know what? Sometimes, I know it's not any of you, and especially you and Bruce. I know it's not any of you. But sometimes in the past, maybe it was me. Where you get into a spiritual discussion, and it feels like you bring out the biggest Bible, probably King James, the biggest Bible you have, and you start beating people over the head with it. You know that the only people that Jesus beat over the head were people who were beaten. The only people Jesus beat over the head with the Bible was people who were beating other people over the head with the Bible. The religious people that Jesus encountered were the ones that were causing the most harm. So, what's desired and what Christians are providing aren't meeting the needs of a culture waiting to be heard. I know we don't all agree on this. I'm just saying, maybe there's a better way forward in sharing Jesus with people we care about and we come in contact with. Because here's a good question I've been struggling with. Are we missing the qualities our changing and spiritually hungry world is listening for? I'm not saying water down the message. I'm not saying change the message. The message of the gospel, of the good news of Jesus and salvation never changes. But the way we talk about it and the way we interact with people has to change. It's not the 50s and 60s and 70s anymore. Because the way we're going, if the invitation of Jesus is come and see, the way we're going is no, people won't come and won't see. We have cocooned ourselves in a place where that's not possible, or we've become so offensive in rejecting people that it's not possible. So there's no presentation. Like if you're here and you're not yet a follower of Jesus, you're like, I've never even heard the good news of Jesus. Maybe you're tuning in online. You've never heard it. Or you heard it in a way that was so tainted, that didn't come with forgiveness, that didn't come with grace, that only came with judgment. Or there's no representation. Like, sad to think, you don't know anybody that lives out a life of Jesus in an honest, real way. So we're faced with the fact, especially in the country we live in, where the chance of people not hearing, that we become a mission field for other countries. Because there's so many people that live in America that aren't coming, aren't seeing, haven't heard, and aren't experiencing what people who love Jesus look like. So come and seize the invitation. Go and be is the action if you're a follower of Jesus. But the goal is connection. Because when you connect with somebody, you've gained an opportunity to talk about Jesus. Let me give you one little snapshot. So Jesus is collecting disciples, all right? Collecting followers. And he gets Andrew and John, and then Andrew gets Peter, and then they pick up Nathanael, and they pick up Bartholomew. And then it's just a handful of them. Then Jesus is going around and doing this thing. If you're familiar with the Bible, in the Gospels, he does this big sermon on the side of a hill, and we get a lot of verses out of that. And then he heals a leper, and he calms the storm. But he's still not done recruiting disciples. So he gets done healing a guy, and he and the, 8 to 10 guys he has with him, they start walking. And Luke tells us, as Jesus went up from there, he saw a man. No, Luke did not tell us this. Matthew told us this. As Jesus went up from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at a tax collector booth. Matthew is writing about Matthew. They see this guy, and as they approach him, all the disciples are like, I hate that guy. Because the tax collector was the evilest of the evilest of the evilest, because he was a Jew working for the Romans, and he could tax and take money from anybody he wanted. As long as Rome got their cut, he could take whatever he wanted. If you're familiar with the Bible, tax collectors are always included with the worst people, sinners and tax collectors. Tax collectors were the worst. So as they approached Jesus and these loving disciples approached, who were spreading the good news of Jesus and what he was going to do, as they approach the tax collector booth, they think, I hate that guy. Let's just get out your wallet, pay the dude. Let's ignore him. Let's call him some names, and let's move on. Because the problem with them and sometimes us was gracism. I don't know if that's a made-up word or not. Gracism. Gracism is, I deserve to be with Jesus, but you don't. This is in living color here in this example. That we think that because of your position in life, because of who you vote for, because of who you live with, because of where you work, because of how you act, because of what you've done, because of what you're addicted to, you don't deserve to get in. I know it's all about grace and stuff, but it's only for me. It's only for people who like me, who vote like me, who look like me, who study like me, who are in a small group like me. And the fact is, people are more ready to receive the good news than we are ready to give it. I know that's harsh, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to be quick and harsh. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting in the tax collector's booth, and he says, "Follow me." And Matthew got up and followed him. And all the disciples are like, no. It's the same invitation he gave the people with him. Hey, Andrew, come and see. Hey, Nathaniel, just follow me. And when they hear the invitation of Jesus, they freak out a minute, and I made this up, and they go like, okay, wait a minute. Follow me means hang out with us. If Matthew chooses to follow Jesus, he's part of us, and we can't be part of a guy who's a tax collector. He's the worst of the worst. It's a way of being right and being protective. And it's wrong. Next verse. Almost done. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, what? Matthew's a tax collector. Matthew's horrible. Who's horrible? I don't know who that is for you. It's like, he went to dinner at Tom Brady's house. Who would do that? All right, pick your person, all right? Like, we hate this guy. And here they are at a party at Matthew's house. I don't know how it happened. And maybe it was like this. Jesus says, follow me. Matthew says, where to? What's next? Jesus said, well, I'm hungry. Matthew says, well, you can come to my house. I got lots of food because I got lots of money because I've been stealing from you people for a long time. And Jesus says, great, let's go. And Matthew says, can I invite some friends? Yeah, I love hanging out with people like that. And they show up at the party, and it is a party. Because it's all of Matthew's tax collector friends. They don't know how to act in church. They don't know how to be Christian. They don't know what the protocol is around this Jesus person. They don't even know who Jesus is. And they're just doing their thing. It's a house party. Whatever that music is that's pumping in there for you, that's what's going on. They don't know they're not supposed to drink beer. They don't know that they're not supposed to do a cake stand. They're just doing it. And Jesus is in the middle of it. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. Next verse. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why? Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? And I get this picture. I may be making this up. I get this picture because Jesus is in the house in the middle of the party. You know what I'm saying? All of Matthew and all of Matthew's friends. The Pharisees, the hit you over the head with the Bible and the rules people, are outside because they're never going to enter in this house. But guess who's out there with them? The other disciples. The other disciples are like, yeah, we love Jesus, But I don't know, Pharisees, you got a good point. These guys are not acting rightly. And I don't want to be. Let's form our own bookstore. You know what I'm saying? Like, wait a minute. Jesus says, he hears them grumbling and hears them debating and talking. And I bet to the disciples, like, yeah, I don't know why he does this. He's never done this before. We see one tax collector, and all of a sudden we're at a party. We don't know what happened. We just follow the guy around. Well, I'm not going to vouch for him. On hearing this, Jesus said, and I think he yelled it, hey, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, y'all. It's the sick. Listen up. All of a sudden, maybe the music goes down a little bit, and all the tax collectors and sinners are leaning in. I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. Listen, if you think you can be good on your own, roll the dice. Take the risk. But I showed up because there's people who are far from God and they're stuck in their sin and they need healing. And those are the people I showed up, the people who are sick and know it and want rescue. And I'm the doctor. And I don't know that he said this, but this is what I would have said. The medicine is called grace, so quit hogging it, spread it around. You worthless gracists. A little harsh. Listen, at some point you're a follower of Jesus. There's this natural connection problem where once you've been a Christian for 7 years, you have no more friends who are far from God. You only hang out with Christian people. Listen, there's no judgment. If you've been involved in real life a long time, you know I'm not judging you. I'm trying to motivate you, not judging you. The Reviving Evangelism study said that over 50% of people who call themselves followers of Jesus have a spiritual conversation twice a year. I bet they talk about the Seahawks more, and I think you should. The Seahawks are great. I mean, we got a new coach. I can talk about. I think we got a chance. I can talk about the Seahawks, and you should. But I'm also a super fan of Jesus, so I want to talk about that too. It was easy when Russell Wilson was here, right? Because he's a great quarterback and he loved Jesus, so you can talk about both at the same time and not feel guilty. How are you? If you're a follower of Jesus? The study also said that 38% of people don't even know anyone who's far from God. So, the solution is intentional. The solution is intentional. If you have discovered forgiveness, grace, love that has come from Jesus, it was always meant to be shared with somebody else. If not, as soon as you said yes to Jesus, he would have just beamed you up right to heaven. Why didn't that happen? Because there's plenty of work to do here. There's plenty of mission. We get to partner with God Almighty, talking about forgiveness and rescue that comes through Jesus, his son. But it's intentional. It doesn't just happen. Now, you don't have to make it awkward. You don't have to force it. We got another couple weeks we're going to talk about stuff. A couple years ago, I was stumbling around YouTube, probably looking at cat videos. And I don't know how I got here, but all of a sudden this video came up. And it was a video of this guy. His name is Penn Jillette. He is part of Penn and Teller. They're magicians, illusionists and stuff. Penn Jillette is an atheist in every sense of the word. He's not a mean atheist. He doesn't persecute Christians. He just doesn't believe there's a God. So obviously he doesn't believe the Bible and doesn't believe Jesus. But on this video, and I ripped it off the video and wrote it down, he talks about a guy coming up after one of his shows and handing him a Gideon's New Testament Bible. And just says, hey, listen, I'm not a magician. I don't run in your circle. I think knowing Jesus is important, and this will be a good way for you to learn about it. Penn Jillette's an atheist. This is what he says. He was moved to tears about it. But he says, listen, I don't respect people who don't proselytize. I don't respect them at all. Proselytize meaning share about your faith. He's not a faith person, but he says, I don't respect people that don't talk about their faith. He goes on, if you believe that there is a heaven and a hell, and people could be going to hell, and you think it's not really worth telling them this because it would make it socially awkward, how much do you have to hate somebody to not proselytize them, to not talk about that? If you think that's harsh, it's like, yeah, Ben Gillette said, I didn't say that. If you really believe, though, he goes on, how much do you have to hate somebody to believe that everlasting life is possible and then not tell them that? I mean, if I believed beyond a shadow of a doubt that a truck was coming at you and you didn't believe it, there's a certain point where I tackle you. And everlasting life is so much more important than that. I know that if you're a follower of Jesus, that there's some twinges of guilt there. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying a real presentation and representation of Jesus is important because people, more than you think, are ready to hear and listen and engage in that. Let me give you some next steps and we're done. Next steps are on the blue card in your handout. You can sign up for stuff in the blue card. You can give us your prayer requests. We pray for it every week. However you want to use that blue card to connect. If you're new, could you fill that out for us and let us know that you were here? Let me give you 3 quick things. Number 1, I'll develop this more in the coming weeks. Your next step, if you're a follower of Jesus, may be this. Hunger for more before hoping for many. Just discovered this. That sometimes people like me, or people that are really excited about Jesus, we want everyone to know Jesus, and we want to see a revival, and we want to see things happen. And again, I've said this so many times. We didn't start Real Life to fill up a building. We start Real Life to reach a community. We didn't start Real Life Brewsters to fill up the middle school. We start to reach a community. Now, we think that people, when they find Jesus, are going to end up coming here and they're going to invite other people there, but that's secondary. But sometimes we need to stop and say, what am I hungering for personally? Where am I at with Jesus today? What am I doing that connects me, that gives me strength, that moves me to know and experience the love of Jesus more? What am I doing daily in my time with Jesus and sitting and listening and talking and reading? Sometimes we need to look at ourselves first before we start in a presentation or representation to people who don't know Jesus. I think it's really important. In my experience, my limited experience with this church, of starting a church, only one I've ever started, is it seems like God brings people around when we're ready for him to bring people around. And maybe you need to start with where you're at as a follower of Jesus now, so you're ready to share when your time comes. Second step, concentrate on relationships. Again, if you're like, hey, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a follower of Jesus, you're talking right over me. I'm going to end with you. Hold on. Instead of a presentation or getting all the facts right, or having a project, or dividing your cul-de-sac into quadrants and just making sure you talk about Jesus and then check it off when that quadrant's done. Just develop relationships with people. My favorite neighbor, no offense to you other neighbors, I got to say this. My favorite neighbors are the Moody's. That's not true. They're just sitting there. My favorite neighbor lives next to me. His name's Kevin. Someday, we're going to talk more about Jesus. But right now, he doesn't want to. He wants to talk about everything else. And I'll mention what I do and he doesn't scoff. He's not mean to me, but he's just like, okay, preacher boy, tell me more about your lawnmower. But I got a relationship with him, and I don't think he's got a lot of relationships with everybody else. But me and Kevin are buddies. I'm looking for a time to say, hey, Kev. I've invited him to church, and he's made it clear he's not coming. But I don't need him to come to church. I need to understand the love of Jesus that guarantees him everlasting life. Finally, if you're here, if you've been tuning in Brewster or here in Chelan, you're like, this is a lot. Maybe just today, maybe this is your day to just take one step towards a loving Jesus. Like, okay, you had a bad church experience. You've been around negative Christians. I get it. But the fact is, there is a truck coming, and it's headed right at you. And you can roll the dice and try to save yourself from your own sin. I don't think that's going to work, because Jesus said it wouldn't. Jesus said the only way to get to the Father, the only way to enjoy eternal life, the only way to have hope in this life and guaranteed in the one to come is to put your faith, to give your life to Jesus. Where you say, by faith, I choose to believe that I am messed up by my sin, separated in a great distance from God Almighty, and I believe that Jesus is the answer because he came and paid that penalty for me when he came and died on the cross. That's the gospel. That's the good news. That's what I'm an enthusiastic advocate about. That's why I'm a super fan. And I pray that maybe it's too much, and maybe you can believe something without understanding everything. But maybe today is your day to say, okay, I'm going to step out. I'm moving in that direction. Maybe your next step is coming back, tuning in. Or maybe your next step is, I choose to give my life to Jesus today, right now, where I'm seated. Then guess what? Jump in on August 11th for baptism, and we'll celebrate that with you.